Hi, everyone. This is AJ Schneider from Loyalty 360, welcoming you to another edition of our Leaders in Customer Loyalty Industry Voices podcast. In these episodes, we talk to the leading agencies, technology partners, and consultants in customer, channel, and brand loyalty about technology, trends, and best practices impacting engagement and customer loyalty. This episode is part of our 2026 Trend Series, where we're talking about what patterns and best practices we're likely to see in the upcoming year. Today, we're speaking with Denise Holt, Senior Vice President and Head of Strategy, Experience, Research, and Insights at Phaedon, and her colleague Emily Merkle, Senior Vice President of Analytics and Data Science. Phaedon is a customer loyalty consultancy with a best-in-class loyalty platform, Tally, that sponsors flexible, modern programs and provides AI-driven insights that help brands understand and act on customer behavior in real time. Phaedon helps brands design, optimize, and measure loyalty strategies by combining consumer research, behavioral insights, and practical frameworks that drive long-term customer engagement and value. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, AJ. Good to
Thank
be
you.
Awesome. It's great to have you guys here. So I want to start off by kind of looking backwards, right? Because we're going to be talking about trends and so on as we move into 2026. So let's look back at 2025 for a minute. And when you do that, what are the 2025 predictions about loyalty that we may have been talking about, a year ago? Predictions, assumptions, expectations. What are the things that ended up coming true, and what are the things that ended up being short-lived and didn't happen at all?
Um, so I guess really thinking back, one of the most common or most prevalent predictions, I think, across all industries, including loyalty, was that people expected and said AI is going to replace humans. And I think we feel that that prediction kind of missed in a few different ways. Yes, AI is here. That is absolutely true. However, really, companies first and foremost haven't really been able to fully productionalize AI across their whole organization in the scale of which, I think was predicted, right? Of removing all humans. And there's been a lot of learnings and testing to really be able to make that fully happen. That just hasn't happened in the last, year. It takes longer than that. I think the second thing is that brands have also been a little bit slower in adopting AI in those consumer-facing ways, more than have been anticipated. And I think that could be for a few reasons. One is, understanding and how to do it and all of the elements that need to be in place to be able to make that change, right? To kind of the first part of like not being able to fully productionalize it. But I think really what it's also leading to is maybe even more importantly that um, consumers and brands are also realizing that human service touch points, like those human interaction touch points, are actually more important or more critical in certain experiences than they ever had been before because of AI coming into the world.
Yeah, I can build upon that, Emily. Because I agree. The way we think about it is that AI should be leveraged to remove the more mundane administrative tasks so humans can focus on what really matters. As Emily said, it kind of was AI is going to take over everything and it'll run loyalty. And it's not about replacing human service, it's about amplifying and enhancing it. Because when human service becomes more meaningful and more personal, that's when you see the stronger emotional connections with customers and ultimately better business outcomes because you're doing that.
Yeah, it almost seems, and you alluded to this, but it almost seems that if companies embrace both the AI portion of their loyalty program, let's say moving forward, but also really look at this as an opportunity to be more human, and to go, dare I say it, maybe even a little old school in some of their touch points and approaches, that indeed may be a differentiator, right off the bat in this day and age.
Absolutely. And AI can help them understand and make those touch points more personalized, but it's still that interaction that is going to set you apart, right?
Yeah.
humans are kind of craving that. They're craving that interaction at certain touch points. Doesn't mean it's right for every touch point along that journey, but making it the right one really does set a company and that brand apart and building that relationship with the consumer.
Well, you jumped in and started talking about AI right off the bat, which is great, which is great. We were going to get to that. So let's just keep going with
Okay.
with the AI kind of portion of our discussion. So it brings into question the idea of and again, you alluded to it of sort of who's ready for it and who's not, which brands are sort of taking that, to heart. But as you look at the brands that are doing a good job of that or are poised to do a good job of that, and then you see the ones that aren't, where are those gaps? Is it, is there an organizational readiness that still has to happen kind of across the board? And if there are gaps, is it technology? Is it resources, talent, data issues? Can you guys talk a little bit about where you see, companies maybe struggling a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start, Denise, if you.
Yeah.
I think there are gaps kind of across the funnel, right? You mentioned a few of them, but like the data structure needs to be different for AI. And when we're saying AI, it's different from traditional predictive AI, right? Like that data structure is different than what's needed for agentic or Gen AI. So organizations need time to make those change to capture it and get it in the way to be fed ongoing. Obviously, in integrations, right? There's more and more integrations coming up within an organization. So they are needing to build and scale those integrations. And then I do think that, talent is also a key one. And the use cases are still really evolving. People started with very tangible use cases, right? Like the small ones that they could put their hands around. And now those, use cases are evolving and becoming more integrated across their MarTech ecosystem and such, which creates some of the ongoing readiness gaps. But I think really, and I had said this in talent, is that AI is still really an emerging technology, at least the Gen AI, the agentic piece of it. And there just is a very limited pool of individuals out there who have that deep knowledge and hands-on experience being able to really deploy it at scale. So that I think is one of the largest gaps right now for brands and organizations across every industry is just having that talent to be able to build it, deploy it, and do it right.
Yeah, Emily, I think the talent and then the educational component becomes really critical because not everyone is innately set up to be able to understand and leverage it to its full potential. I think AI adoption really started with an efficiency play, as we've seen it working with a lot of our clients and industry partners, and meaning to like help employees work faster or smarter. So I think that's the way that got the most, had the most impact this last year. But even with that, there's still people trying to get rolling. Now the challenge is really a broader adoption and moving beyond the efficiency piece into how AI can enhance the customer experience. So I think people have been very internally focused with AI this year. Now it's about how do we actually impact the experience that our customers have and how do we do some of that, the personalization, the meaningful piece. AI can really help accelerate that in order to do it faster, quicker, and get that data in the hands of the right humans to be able to deliver a great service.
And,
But
and I would,
it's a much bigger shift.
yeah, and I would say, Denise, just to ladder a little bit on that, I think consumers are more ready for it too.
Yeah.
Right? Like we as consumers are much more comfortable using AI ourselves, right? Like we all have our, Claudes or our Chat GPs or our favorite that we go to for our own personal things now. So I think there is, it's not just the readiness at the brand or industry level, it's also at the consumer level that is making it ready and right more this year to institute it kind of across the journey.
They're understanding the benefits that can come from it. Yeah.
Right.
And also the watch outs. AJ, were you going to say something?
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there. Yeah.
No
Well, I
worries.
was going to ask, maybe that's a good segue into sort of a little bit of a privacy discussion as well, in the sense that you've got people, as part of the loyalty program, sort of handing over data willingly, right? In most cases. And then we're applying, as we move forward, we're applying, AI tools on top of that to sort of make decisions about what we should show them, what kind of content they should have access to, and so on, based on their, on the data that they provided. But
Yeah.
it makes me wonder though, you mentioned up from the consumer side being ready, and I deal a lot with smaller companies as well. The tendency is to say, oh, we're going to apply it. I'm going to use this term generically, a chat GPT to this data and get X, Y, Z out of it. But the reality is for companies, particularly larger companies that have lots of data, and I imagine this is where you guys come in at Phaedon, you can't really use chat GPT, set it loose on customer data, and then start making decisions based on that. It's dangerous in a whole host of ways. So I assume that your clients are using the tools that you create, and they're customized specifically for what they're experiencing, what their data is going to be showing, so the customer's safe, and nobody is. It's not, there's no danger that it's going to go out into the cloud, willy-nilly type thing.
Yeah, maybe because I was headed straight into a governance in my next when you brought that up. So that's a perfect segue. But then Emily, maybe you might want to comment on that after. But the governance piece was a major reason why some organizations were slow to adopt AI early on, because they were scared, and you need to set up the right guardrails, especially around customer data. Especially in highly regulated industries, that was really critical before they could move forward. So you did see, especially in some industries, a slow adoption. But we're starting to see more organizations really formalize their AI approach, and that includes the security and the walls that you're talking about. Emily, did you want to add anything more about that?
Yeah, I think. And that is part of kind of the setup that companies had to do. And again, you had kind of said like, well, what do we do at Phaedon? And absolutely, that's our number one goal. When we introduced more broad Gen AI, right? So you're bringing in the LLMs from the outside world that are learning and growing, et cetera. We purposely did it in a thoughtful way that everything is behind our firewall, right? So everything that is we get access to the best in class LLMs in the world, but is behind our firewall. So everything we are putting into it from our customers' data, and therefore their customers' data, none of that is getting used to train any models outside the world. So it doesn't leak back out. And then on top of that, it is also done at a client level, right? So we're not mixing client learnings across each other. So that is obviously was one of our top priorities a few years ago when we started building these tools. Because that's important. And then the other part is there are also some benefits in doing that too, because then when you're asking for it from that consumer, it also isn't, picking up stuff from somebody else, right? And then it's not relevant in your world too. So absolutely. And I would say, agentic AI just brings a whole different thing, right? Like, each tool isn't doing the same thing like a chat GPT where you ask it a question, right? Like there needs to be a lot of thought put into how these products are being built so that the right thing is answered or the right output comes back, right? So that there's guardrails really put around each of those tools. And so it helps, prevent a lot of the hallucinations if it only has data that it's supposed to have, and it has that guardrails around, this agent does this agent doesn't do something else kind of thing. So lots of different things kind of neat happening in that world. But I do think that also does lead it to like, there was the governance piece. And I don't know, AJ, if you even thinking about this, but, understanding from the consumer side, right? Like, what am I giving and how is it being used? So there's that whole data exchange aspect. And so, Denise, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, kind of our take on when we go out with our clients and such, what are we recommending for really that kind of that best in class like process for, letting consumers know how data is being used?
Yeah, I think in general, it's a couple things. It has not changed that customers are willing, especially younger generations, to give up data, give up information about themselves if they see a direct turnaround of value back in return. So that hasn't changed. AI will just speed up the ability to leverage that data in a meaningful way. I think it's important with customers, with our clients too, that they think about what are those key pieces of data that are important to collect in order to impact the experience. Because you don't need to collect data just for the sake of collecting data. So when you think about that for the future, it's about really being able to act on it immediately to demonstrate value, to personalize an experience, to help the member, to help develop this more emotionally connected relationship, and feedback that you understand them and you're here to make their lives better and easier.
Yeah, and it's a little bit about transparency as well, right? Like brands who are transparent with what they're doing continue to build that trust with their consumer base, right? So being able to explain it clearly, and again, what that value exchange is going to be really helps create that relationship. And so, you don't want to hide what you're doing, right? Because that can only lead to bad things, but also you need to do it in a way that like your consumer isn't going through 30 pages of T&Cs to understand what's happening as well, right? So it's about using those effective communications in a very, clear and human speak way about what you're doing, and not making it super technical as well, to articulate the value and what they're doing with it.
Yeah. No, all of that makes perfect sense. And so why don't we kind of take a step back and talk about sort of the strategy and program design that you guys are seeing a little bit in terms of your clients and what they're looking at moving forward. And one of the things that we're seeing in the loyalty industry as a whole is kind of the blending of different types of loyalty strategies and combining them into sort of one approach. So maybe combining memberships and subscriptions and other loyalty specific programs. What are the benefits of that blending that you're seeing, and how does Phaedon help address the issues that might come from that?
Yeah, I think brands are always looking for new revenue streams. So that's really where subscription models have come into play, and they create a more predictable revenue. But they also complicate the story for customers. So you really have to be very intentional about differentiating the benefits across tiers and making it clear why someone would choose one option over another. And if it gets too complex or hard to understand, it really becomes a barrier to customers interacting with you. And I think about this in the way of like tiers. Some clients are talking about we have a completely separate subscription program, but now it's conflicting with our highest elite tiers as far as the benefits that are received. So how do we get clarity between those two? How do we really understand whether a subscription model is an overlay and an add-on to our existing tiered loyalty structure, or whether it needs to continue to sit off to the side as something completely separate from that? So I think just taking a holistic look at your tiering structure, your benefits, your subscription, looking into research on your customers and what their needs and wants are, what's going to move, what's going to change their behavior in a way that's positive for your business and delivers value for them, and taking a look at that as a whole, so that you make sure you have clear distinctions between them and that there's value in each of those different areas. Emily, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say kind of Denise has, talked about the complexity that adds to it and needing to do it in the right way for the value exchange. We help a lot of our customers around how do you know if it's right? And all of that comes back to the data and the analysis and your customer base, right? So as you're blending these different mechanisms within loyalty, it's really understanding where is there an audience, right? Do you have an audience that a paid subscription would work, or a membership? And what would they pay for that, right? Like, where are those points? And data can help you get to that. Customer research layered on top of that also gets the ability to understand what that impact would be, and can also help really model the ROI, right? So the ROI of what the benefit will be to your customer and to the brand. And so we do a lot of that through economic modeling, strategy engagements, and research. Because again, it all comes back to making sure that as things blend and you're building out a program and an engagement strategy with your customer base, that there's value for both sides. And so you don't want to just add complexity for the sake of it if it doesn't make sense. So it all comes back to really helping make sure there is data, there's a pocket, there's a consumer need for what you're doing, and that you're providing that value to them and to you as a business as well.
So let's talk about that sort of engagement strategy aspect of this for a minute, and specifically about the concept of shared experience as a way to build loyalty. More brands have really begun to take that piece seriously, and this idea of creating shared communities, and playing off of the customer identity and sense of belonging to a larger group as part of the loyalty program. What are some of the most effective ways that you've seen brands, your clients, embedding those kinds of features into their loyalty programs?
Yeah, I think this has become really, really important. One of the big underlying trends we've seen is an increase in loneliness as the world becomes more digitally driven. So, community and belonging, whether that's facilitated digitally or in person, really can help restore that sense of human connection. And I think loyalty programs can play a meaningful role there. You've seen this with examples like Nike Run Clubs or outdoor brands that focus on maybe conservation and shared values, trying to connect to the heart and people's values. They're creating spaces for people to connect around something bigger than a transaction, and quite honestly, bigger than themselves. And that's where this belonging piece really starts to take shape.
Yeah, in the brands that do it well, Denise mentioned Nike, but brands that do it well are doing it because they understand their consumer base. Again, right? They're not trying to build community for community's sake. They're building it around a need. And they're building it around a need that also is true to their core values as a brand as well. So it's authentic in what it's doing. So they know what matters to them and they align those values. And again, it creates that authentic relationship between them and their customers, so that it can have reason for being and feel true to the customer too.
Is there, kind of going back to the AI tools and personalization, customization, eh, part of the psychological approach here, right, is that if a consumer can potentially see themselves or see their values in the brand that they're working with or that they're being approached by, they're more likely to buy. And that's been an advertising principle for eons, right? So are brands also being sort of more individually specific? I mean, it's one thing to sort of create a community and sort of I'll say like-minded, potential customers or existing customers, we'll kind of gather toward that. But through personalization, is it possible to sort of tease out individual customers, sensibilities and feed them content and information based on their individual, affiliations?
Yeah, I think that as a brand, you stand for things that you kind of put out customer facing, that maybe attracts a customer in the first place with shared overarching values. I do think, though, that as you become a customer, as you become a loyalty program member, as there's opportunities to learn more information about you, brands can ask more detailed levels about, they might, for example, offer up a benefit where you can choose between 4 of this year's charities. And you start to learn a little bit by a little bit, where does this overarching shared value come into something even more specific into an organizational level and a charity that you appreciate supporting. So I think there's ways with zero-party data where you can take that down to a deeper level. And again, what will be your reason for asking that? What are you going to do with that data? It's a feel-good moment, I think, when you're able to allow an individual to have a choice in where a benefit goes, and they feel like they got to support that organization a little more closely because they chose to direct that benefit that way. But at the very highest level, it has to be the shared values of the brand itself. Why were you attracted to the brand itself? What is it that they're putting out in the universe that shows you feel good about saying that's a brand that you do a lot of business with? And then developing the choice and leveraging zero-party data to take that further.
And I think the AI piece on personalization comes in that you can still have community and all of those elements, but also there's moments when introduction into those communities or key timings in the journey that personalization can help, right? Like you may not want to target everybody for certain of elements of these communities or the belonging experiences that they're looking for. AI and data can help you understand when is the appropriate time to introduce it. When are people getting more involved? Is it after certain interactions with a brand? Is it right away? All of those pieces. We're not as humans all the same. So AI can also help do that. And like, how do I need to be communicated about one thing versus somebody else? That's different. Or what channel I want to be. Those are different ways that they can all still have the same community or the value, the benefit, but still personalize that experience within there as well.
Well, community and connection mean different things to different people too. We did our Phaedon 2026 predictions, and mine was about that brands are going to let consumers decide how connected they want the relationship. Maybe they want to just be slightly anonymous, but get great service and they love the brand. And as long as they know they support that, that's great. Down to, I want to share everything about my life with you. And then I want you to turn around and do great things and personalize my experience. So like almost seeing a scale of a first question as you join a loyalty program. How well do you want us to know you? And the consumer is going to have a lot of choice in that, almost like a sliding scale that they can choose. And then that sets off this journey for each of the loyalty program members based on what they chose.
Design your own loyalty program.
Yep.
Exactly. And it's transparent. You know what you're getting and why you're getting it because you told us.
And whereas in the past, that would be very impossible to manage something like that and operationalize so much choice. AI and all the advancements that we have are going to make that easier and easier. So it'll be interesting to see that play out.
Another kind of hot topic, over the past year, really, it's been several years, is the partnership discussion. And so I'm curious, as we go into 2026, how partnerships fit into everything that you were just talking about. Are there some specific categories that you think are going to be, really rise to the top as we move into the new year? Travel, it seems to always be an important one, but between retail and travel and financial services and so on, where do you think the biggest growth in partnerships will be in the new year?
Yeah, I think agnostic of what industry you happen to be in, partnerships is the hottest topic right now. We're seeing strong momentum around everyday brands. So think about grocery, fuel, other frequent purchase categories, because they really deliver that daily visible value to the customer. Larger and more infrequent purchase brands are partnering with them to stay relevant and top of mind. I think we saw that immediately during COVID with big travel brands really leaning on their co-brand credit cards and spending outside of travel because no one was traveling. That has just continued on to see that you need to be a part of people's daily lives. And how do you do that? So it's kind of twofold as well. Like you're extending value to existing customers. If you're smart about your partnerships, you're extending value to those existing customers, but you're also then getting exposure with new customers because of this partner relationship. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, partnerships is one of the most number one questions we are asked about most recently, and it's always been a part, but it has majorly escalated in brands kind of thought process. And as Denise said, right, everybody wants this everyday brand, and so that's great. However, there are some kind of warning signs or some things that brands also need to look out for. Just because you want a partnership doesn't make it necessarily the right partnership to have it, right? So the big watch out that we have and we advise on is that making sure the partnerships you are putting forth make sense for your customer base. Because if you have a mismatch, sometimes that mismatch could be geography, right? Where they're just never going to overlap at all, ever, or they're never going to be interesting for that purpose. Or the value extension is not there for the consumer. It's just because you want that partnership, it's going to create more confusion. It's going to create noise in the program, right? So you're going to have this whole list of partnerships and people are going to be like, I don't get it. So again, it's really coming back to being thoughtful and having that value exchange, right? Because you want crossover, right? It's good to have deeper relationships of your consumer base, earning and burning maybe in their daily life somewhere else, but you also want it from an acquisition standpoint. So you still want there to be some lack of overlap, right, between each, because you're trying to introduce new people as well to your brand and to your partner's brand as well.
And I think there's much more pressure now too to define a clear mutual value proposition when brands are approaching each other about partnership. And what is that mutual value proposition? What are we each going to get out of that? And you were starting to talk about that too, Emily. Like having too many partnerships dilutes the brand and complicates the message. It really makes it hard for customers to know what's actually relevant to them. I think back when, in the early days of loyalty programs, and some brands, especially in the travel space, would have hundreds and hundreds of partners. And as a consumer, you just literally it was so many that it was overwhelming, and there weren't tools to figure out what was going to be the most relevant to you. What are you going to love? And so what they found is that they weren't even getting the value for having those partnerships because consumers were overwhelmed by it, and they just gave up. They didn't even know how to sift through it, how to create that value. So I think this is where kind of AI is going to help with that and bring that personalization to bear. I think brands are being much more selective about the partnerships that they create for the benefit of their customers. And then they're going to be trying to serve them up in really personalized, relevant ways based on what they know about their customer.
It sounds like really that's the key thread through all of that, is that at the end of the day, if you can have lots of fancy partnerships or even one that sounds like it has marquee value, but if the customer isn't really deriving value from it, then it wears off pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, to wrap up, let's talk a little bit about something that, that maybe folks were thinking, about loyalty that, that now know, having been through, some ups and downs in the economy over the last couple of years, with the introduction of AI in a much more aggressive way and so on. What are some assumptions that people were making about loyalty, over the last couple of years, let's say, that they need to sort of like throw out the window as we move forward? Like what just didn't turn out to be true?
I think it wasn't even really a prediction per se, but I think just the word loyalty, the biggest outdated assumption is that loyalty is a program. And I think it's still today, it's evolving, but it's still today when you say loyalty, it's like, oh, what program are you in? Loyalty is the outcome that you're trying to achieve in a relationship between a brand and a customer. And quite honestly, it extends beyond that too. That can be between a brand and an employee, between a brand and a B2B partner, but thinking about loyalty no longer as a program, but an outcome. And every part of the organization plays a role in delivering it. So that's the part that I think it's gone into, is organizational structure. If you get beyond thinking about loyalty as a program, that means that every part of your organization has a role to play in developing a loyal relationship with a customer. That includes operations, that includes technology, that includes data. So really, that taking that approach and perspective as an organization helps you to bring more people into the conversation around how to strengthen customer relationships for the long term.
Yeah, and it makes what everybody is doing align to the same common goal. Everybody across your organization is responsible for loyalty. And so then it makes decisions easier in what you're doing, and you're all speaking at that common language to derive that same outcome, right? That then brings value to your business as well.
Gotcha. Yep. Words to live by. Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today on the podcast, and we look forward to hearing updates from Phaedon as we move into 2026.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate it.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in to our Leaders in Customer Loyalty podcast series. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Leaders in Customer Loyalty podcast and follow Loyalty 360 on YouTube and LinkedIn. The links are provided below. Please join us every Tuesday for another edition of our Industry Voices podcast.